We'll call the meeting of the Planning Commission to order for the meeting December 17th, 2019. Can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Sattler. Vice Chair Borders.
Here.
Commissioner Dors. Commissioner Aswine. Commissioner Preston. Commissioner Tingle. Commissioner Wiggins. A quorum's present.
Thank you. Commissioner Dors, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Before I mention the public comment, I just want to announce for the audience, if you're here for the Anderson Ranch, that will not be being heard till 5:30 at the earliest. So if you have something else to do or whatever and want to come back, but that's when that actual item will come on the agenda. At this point, for public comment, the public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Planning Commission, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. Is there any public comment at this time?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Irina. This is Galina. We are from Russian Dance Ensemble, the Gold Domes of Russia. Our ensemble created 20 years ago in Reno. Galina is the president of Russian American Society in Reno, and also she's the director of our ensemble for more than 20 years. And we usually perform in San Francisco, in the Russian Culture Festival and other popular nations festivals. But this time, first time ever, and it will be the only concert, we will perform here at Carson City Community Center Theater on January 11th, on Saturday at 6 p.m. And we would like to invite all of you, because you are locals, to our concert. We are a non-profit organization, and everything what created within 20 years, it's going to be one of the best concerts because we would like to introduce ourselves locally. So we decided to start in the capital of Nevada first, but we all live and work in Reno for many, many years. Galina, we're both American citizens, and Galina, she has lived in America for 27 years, and I'm for 26 years already. So, yes, we would like, so please pay attention on an advertisement. It's on a billboard next to a community center, and the tickets you can purchase, if you will let us, we will quickly, we'll leave these invitations. And whoever would like to come, please pick one. We're preparing an amazing show, beautiful choreography and appropriate music and talented artists. So the tickets are very affordable. We made the prices complimentary. For seniors, $15, and the general admission, $25 per ticket. For any audience appropriate. You can bring grandchildren, elderly, any age. Yeah, but because we are first time advertising, we would like if you will pay by cash or by check. Mostly we will try to do it like first experiment here. So we'll see how it will go. And next year we're going to perform in Reno. We already booked up like for seven new performances. Well, thank you for your attention.
Right.
And we're not going to take more time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Merry Christmas to everyone.
Same to you. If you want to just leave them on the back table, that's where all the information can be picked up, et cetera. Thank you. Any other public comment at this time? Yes, sir. If you'd like to come forward and state your name on the mic, hit the button. If it's green on the base of the mic, it's on.
This is for the Adele's building.
He's here to speak on
Actually, that item is on the agenda, so typically, folks who speak to it will speak to the commission at the time the commission's considering that specific item.
I didn't see that on the agenda, but I can wait.
Yeah, it's E4.
Okay.
Okay.
Will be like the fourth item. If you got a place you have to get to, we can take your information now, or we can wait till we do that.
No, I'm happy to wait.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Any other public? If you come forward and state your name, sir.
Denny French, Carson City, Nevada. Thank you, Chair and Board. I'm a little late because I had to use the restroom, last minute thing. But the deal is that, so I'm not sure where you are on the agenda, just basic first comments, is that all right? My first comments are that I'm concerned about the development happening so quickly right now. I don't.
Excuse me, sir, are you here for the Anderson Ranch development?
No, I'm not at this point
Oh,
discussing
this is just
such.
general,
In
okay.
general, sir. In my consideration, we are moving very quickly on areas that could jeopardize future of Carson City residents here by making us in a position where we could be liable for just issues that come up on properties that you have zoned as housing. And some of those properties I would contest are not proper for such. But the main thing is I'm here today to get a chance to meet you all and to see how things work so that I can work in a positive way to make my suggestions and have an overall opportunity to communicate with you. Thank you very much, and I look forward to being able to comment later on the others.
Certainly, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment at this time? Seeing none. Approval of minutes. For possible action, approval of minutes for the November 19 meeting. I have a couple of items. On page 8, it mentions Chairperson Sattler entertain comments. The notification, it's on that, and it says everyone within 100 yards of that would have been notified. I don't think I stated a yardage. I don't know what the proper yardage was. I just stated it would have been done, whatever is required to notify people. And on page 12, down in the last paragraph, Chairman Sattler relayed his experience of working in an asphalt plan. I imagine that was supposed to be plant, but I never worked in the plant. I kind of was around it because we would get our asphalt and oil and that from there. So maybe from working around an asphalt plant would be a proper correction. That's all I had. Anything else? Commissioner Borders?
Mr. Chairman, with those corrections, I move to accept the minutes.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? Second. Commissioner second, Wiggins. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Modification of agenda. I understand we're going to have a slight modification of the agenda. Hope?
Yes, Mr. Chair, to accommodate somebody who's present would like to speak on a certain item, we would like to take item E7 first. We expect this to be brief, and then we'll get on with the rest of the agenda.
Okay, E7 SUP-10-115. For possible action, discussion and possible action requesting the director to investigate the conduct of Tahoe Western Asphalt relative to special use permit SUP-10-115 as amended, located at 8013 Highway 50 East, APN 008-611-35, to determine if grounds exist for revocation of reexamination of the special use permit. Hope?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item provides the Planning Commission with the opportunity to direct the Community Development Director to open an investigation into the conduct of Tahoe Western Asphalt relative to Special Use Permit 10-115 as amended. On November 19th, the Planning Commission conducted a one-year review and heard public comment regarding odors and hours of operation. The Planning Commission requested that the staff agendize this matter so the Planning Commission could request the investigation. This is the first step should we ultimately get to a revocation. If you so direct, the next step would be for the director to advise, we would notify the business owner first that we were investigating. We would then come back to the Planning Commission with the findings of the investigation. If upon hearing the findings, the commission could then direct the staff to issue and serve the applicant with an order to show cause why the special use permit should not be revoked. Once the business receives the copy of the order, the Planning Commission could conduct a public hearing on the matter. Based on past input, staff recommends that the Planning Commission request the Community Development Director investigate the conduct of Tahoe Western Asphalt relative to SUP 10-115 as amended. Mark Simmons, who represents Tahoe Western Asphalt, is present and would like to address the commission, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions for staff?
I have one.
Commissioner Borders?
Hope, can you give us a feeling for the timeline of all this? From if what we're considering tonight was approved, what's the time frame that we're looking at for all this to go forward?
Well, we have a couple things in play right now. In February, the Board of Supervisors will be considering an appeal of your last decision. So I just wanted to inform you of that. I think we do recognize how focused the Planning Commission is on this, and we would strive to give you an update on the investigation at the January meeting. At that time, we may ask, depending on what we discover, to keep the investigation open so we can continue the investigation, or there may be enough there that the commission wants to take an action other than keeping the investigation open. So I would expect at minimum some type of report to you at the January meeting.
So obviously with that, then hope the appeal would take place probably at the next board meeting or the one whatever before that?
The appeal will occur at a February board meeting. I believe it will be the first meeting, but there's still some discussions on that.
Other questions for staff? Seeing none, applicant or representative like to come forward, please?
My name is Mark Simons, correct for the record. I've been retained to represent Tahoe Western Asphalt with regard to its operation and its oversight. I understand that there was a little bit of a heated exchange back in November with some residents complaining of odor issues. So what I want to bring to your attention, and I know this is a low standard to achieve to initiate an investigation, is some of the information that you should consider whether to take that next step or not. First off, it's a heavily regulated operation. And the bag house is the primary operation. And for your information, the bag house is in full compliance with its operating specs and has been fully reported to the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection and is in full compliance. So there's no deviation. As you are aware, that the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection oversees and permits all operations. As of 10 days ago, the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection issued a letter saying that Tahoe Western Asphalt is in good standing with the above referenced permit, is in full compliance with the permit obligations, which deal with particulates and odors. On November 6, 2019, staff reviewed some of the complaints that had been coming through. And again, there's a small vocal adversarial group that does not want that. We understand that there's always been that, even from your initial special use approval, that there's a lack of substantiated concern and staff is not recommending any further action. And again, we have a concern of objective evidence versus subjective complaints. Now, the subjective complaints is what you heard the last time. I'm here to just give you an overview of the objective evidence. Staff indicated there was no they could not substantiate the contentions. In addition, we took a look at the complaints that had been made in the last 12-month period of time. And out of 226 complaints, 216, 95% were by 6 individuals. And these 6 individuals are actively engaged in making representations that they smell odors, even on days when the business is not operating. And it's systematic, and you can go down, there's a couple of these individuals that are every day, they get up, have their coffee, they issue their complaints. We understand that asphalt companies do have odors. That's why you condition the original special use permit on the use of Ecobsorb, which is being used and employed. So at this stage of the game, what I'm trying to say is, one, we have no objective evidence. Yes, we have subjective complaints, but nothing objective. There's no notice to you that they're in violation of the NDEP permits. There's no indication to you that the particulates coming out of the baghouse are in excess of what's allowed. What we do have is we have some subjective concerns about people that would like this business not to exist. Unfortunately, they're in full compliance with the special use permit. There has not been a deviation from the conditions that you imposed, at least none that I'm aware of. The Ecobsorb is being used, whether it's achieving the standard, a subjective standard of one person or another, I can't speak to that. Lastly, if you do proceed with an investigation, we would be more than happy to participate in any manner. And just for your edification, there's additional improvements that the company has been working with NDEP to implement some new equipment, not necessarily a $2 million piece of equipment that I believe was discussed the last operation, but other activities that would relate to that. And I'm willing to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioner Doors?
Commissioner Doors, for the record. I'm sorry, what was your name? I didn't write it down.
Mark Simons, S-I-M-O-N-S.
Simons. Mr. Simons, I fully understand and appreciate your comparison for us for the objective versus subjective evidence. For the record, can we be reminded how many times the officials went up there and there was only one time out of, I think, 6 that they didn't smell it, and that was city officials that reported back, is that right?
The code enforcement went out 6 times, and 5 of the times they did smell an odor. You also received testimony or evidence from NDEP regarding their observations and from Lyon County Code Enforcement. I can't remember what their numbers were. Again, I'll remind the commission what we're considering here is whether or not to direct the director to open an investigation.
I think for the record to finish that's enough objective evidence for me to make my decision, so thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant, Terry or Commissioner?
That's okay. My I think statement is although it might be okay for EPA and federal, is it okay for Carson City? And I think that's basically the statement that I want to make. And from the testimony that we've heard and the fact that people can only go out during certain hours because there's only certain officials that can actually check this out during certain times, it's certainly limited it. And so my feeling is let's go forward.
Well, and my comments are the regs were written, I believe, in 1975 that they're working under for that aspect of it. In our notes, it mentions NDEP also cited the business 7 times for violations of air quality with fines of $61,555. I can personally attest to the fact, and I did at the last meeting, I used to work in that industry. I was going towards Dayton on a trip back in October down to southern Utah. I went by there about 7:30. And it was so noxious, I could still smell it in my car down at the Virginia City turnoff when I was going towards Dayton. So there is, and I've often smelled it going out. I play Dayton golf course quite often. So I'm not challenging whether he's doing what he was told to do. We were saying we don't believe the Econosorb is working is part of the problem. Okay. So that's just my thoughts.
So we just may speak to those that, it's on? Okay. Speak to those prior violations. That was correct. When they were getting the baghouse set and getting it within specs, there was some deviation, and now it's fully operational. And if you notice, there hasn't been any NDEP violations for, I think, 2 years, but I could be wrong. I'm just going off of memory. Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? Yes.
I just want to add, Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director, that I think the report should come in February, just because there's an appeal going in early February and gives them time to respond to the appeal and to report to you on the outcome of that as well. If in fact you initiate.
Well, and that's why I asked when the appeal would be, because it didn't make much sense for us to move on it to the next phase or whatever if we go that route till after the appeal. The applicant. Thank you.
One last thing, this raises kind of a particular issue with procedurally, because I understand you, from the last hearing, that there was an implementation of a condition, or at least two conditions. One required a piece of equipment, and that was one of the basis of the appeal. Now, if we're stepping back, or this panel stepping back, and say we'd like to reinitiate an investigation before imposing any conditions, that may make that appeal moot.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Go ahead, please.
the Planning Commission requested an investigation based on compliance with findings. I think we need to focus on findings and whether or not those findings are continuing to be met and whether the applicant is meeting the requirements that were represented. So I agree we can wait and see what the Board of Supervisors does, but I don't think now is the time for this conversation. We're considering whether or not to have an investigation. If you'd like the Community Development Director to pursue the investigation, 100% we'll meet with Mr. Simons and his colleagues and get all their input and bring that forward to you. Thank you.
That would be part of the investigation that we're asking for, and that's all we're doing here is asking to start an investigation. The appeal can still go forward. It doesn't really, we will wait till after the appeal before any final stuff is done, so.
Thank you.
Do we need to take public comment on this item? Yes, okay. Anyone else in the audience, public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for further discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chair, a motion?
Commissioner Doris.
I move, Commissioner Doris for the record, I move to request that the Community Development Director investigate the conduct of Tahoe Western Asphalt relative to Special Use Permit SUP-10-115 as amended.
I'll second that. Commissioner Sattler? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, moving on. What did I do in my agenda? E1 LU-2019-0069 for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a request for a modification of a special use permit SUP-15-07 to allow a new 189 square foot patio cover to be added to an existing guest building and a new 220 square foot freestanding pergola, resulting in a cumulative square footage of accessory building exceeding 75% of the square footage of the primary structure on property zone single-family 1 acre SF1A located at 2053 Valley View Drive, APN 010-185-08. Heather?
Thank you. Heather Ferris, Associate Planner for the record. In 2015, the Planning Commission approved a special use permit for a guest building exceeding 1,000 square feet or 50% of the living area of the primary dwelling, whichever is less. The square footage of the detached accessory structures totaling more than 75% of the primary structure, and the total square footage of the detached accessory structures exceeding 5% of the parcel size. The existing primary residence, shown on the right of the screen, is 2,159 square feet, including the attached garage. The guest building is 2,275 square feet, including the garage. And there are also 2 sheds located on the property totaling 184 square feet. The cumulative square footage of all of the existing detached accessory structures totals 2,467 square feet, or approximately 115% of the square footage of the primary structure and 5.4% of the total lot area. The applicant is proposing the construction of a 224 square foot freestanding pergola and a 189 square foot solid patio cover attached to the guest building. This would increase the total cumulative square footage of the accessory structures to 2,880 square feet, or approximately 133% of the square footage of the primary structure and approximately 6.3% of the total lot area. Carson City Municipal Code 18.05.055 requires approval of a special use permit when the cumulative square footage of accessory structures is more than 75% of the primary structure, and when the cumulative square footage exceeds 5% of the parcel size. The proposed patio cover and pergola will increase the cumulative square footage of the accessory structures as reviewed in 2015, and therefore require a modification to the special use permit. The Planning Commission is authorized to approve the modification to the special use permit. As you know, there are 7 findings of fact that must be made in the affirmative in order to approve the special use permit modification. Staff has made all 7 findings in the affirmative and is recommending approval subject to 8 conditions of approval, which are included in your staff report. We have received no public comment regarding this project. The applicant, Norm Chamberlain, is here and may wish to address the Planning Commission, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Heather. Is this something that look, I don't understand, pergolas or non-sided buildings are considered structures like patio covers and pergolas? And
It's
need a special-
considered an accessory structure, yes.
Is that something we might be looking at in Title 18 to consider where it can just be done by staff rather than?
I think we could, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Borders?
Just one out of curiosity, when does the secondary structure become the primary structure?
I think when we label it that way on the plans. I mean, at this point, the living space for the guest building is still less than the living space for the primary dwelling. It's all
Not
of the.
very much.
By about 400 square feet, yeah.
Well, and like we had discussed before, that's kind of what people out there often get the acreage so they can put up a mother-in-law's quarters or something like that. Go ahead, Commissioner Preston.
I think the thing that I found really interesting, though, is when I went out there to try to locate this piece of property, is there's 2 separate addresses. That to me is a concern, considering it's zoned 1 single family per 1 acre. You have an address on Valley View and you have an address on Conte. So what are we doing? Are we creating something? Has something been created here where we run into a situation where we have 2 structures that are not in compliance because you have 2 essentially single-family homes with 2 single-family with addresses? So that's my question
So
on that.
addressing is done for fire and life safety purposes, and fire and engineering and utilities, but primarily for fire and life safety. So engineering and fire work together in addressing all structures. So it doesn't create parcels, it simply addresses the structures.
Quacks like a duck.
Other questions for staff? Seeing none, would the applicant come forward, please? And would you please state your name for the record, sir?
Norman Chamberlain.
Mr. Chamberlain, first of all, you agree with all the 8 recommendations for conditions of approval? Is there anything you'd like to add to Hope's presentation? Or whatever?
No.
Thought I did. Sorry about, Norman Chamberlain. And like I said, we built the structure to move my mom in back in 2015, and she just wants a little shade out there now for couple things in the backyard, so.
Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on this item at this time? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for further discussion or a motion. Commissioner Borders?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve LU 2019-0069 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Commissioner Tingle, seconds. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Good luck, thank you. Moving on. E2, LU-2019, wait a minute. 2019-0071 for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the request for a special use permit to exceed the permitted sign area and sign height for a new sign on property zone multifamily apartment, NMFA, located at 405 East College Parkway, APN 002-052-09. Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you had a chance to go by the site over on College Parkway, you are able to see there's an existing changeable copy sign on the subject property right along the College Parkway frontage. The existing sign has an overall height of 9 feet and the sign is 40 square feet. The proposed sign will have a height of 8 feet 6 inches and an area of 40 square feet. The new sign's proposed to be located southwest of the existing sign so that there will be greater distance between the sign and the sidewalk. The development standards 4.4.7F state that signs denoting religious institutions are exempt from the sign code provided the sign area does not exceed 32 square feet and the height of the freestanding sign does not exceed 8 feet. The development standards 4.6.5 allow for variations to the sign standard subject to a special use permit. As you know, the Planning Commission has the authority to approve a special use permit upon making each of the 7 required findings in the affirmative. As you'll see on the comparison chart that I posted for you, we are going to slightly lower in terms of the sign height. The sign size will be identical. The Community Development Director was just asking me about it being an electronic sign and the different standards we have about how quickly the image can change and dimming of it and so on and so forth. And you'll remember that those requirements are now in code. They've been in code for about 2 years now. So it used to be we would enumerate all those requirements, but now if you have an electronic sign, like a TV screen, if you will, you have to comply with those standards. So I did want to mention that to you. Phil Elliott with the Church of Seventh-day Adventist is present, and he is the applicant on this project. I was just brief with you, but if you'd like me to go in depth on anything, I'm happy to. Thank you.
questions for staff? Commissioner
Was
Borders?
there originally an SUP for the sign when it was originally constructed?
Whoops. I have not seen one. I understand it's been there for more than 20 years.
Any other questions for staff? The applicant like to come forward, please. Welcome, sir. If you'd state your name for the record, and yeah, if it's green, you're good to go.
Phil Elliott.
First of all, sir, the 9 conditions of approval are fine with you, sir? Is there anything you'd like to add to Hope's presentation or whatever to us?
The only thing I'd like to add is that when we originally called about replacing the sign, we were told by city planning that we would be grandfathered in because it was the same size physically what we already had. And then when we did get our sign, which has been standing in our carport for about 2 years, we were told, no, we need to get the special use permit. So we attempted to go through this. my co-head elder at the time has had a heart and head problem, was hospitalized for some time. We all thought that he had done all this legwork, and I found when I took over that nothing had been done. And Ms. Sullivan has been extremely helpful to me. I'd like to say that for the record. And I'd appreciate you hearing this today. Thank you.
I imagine, sir, if it had been a like sign, it would have been grandfathered, but I'm guessing because it turned to electric is why it would have to come before us, I think. So.
I think what it is they're literally removing the sign. So when they remove it, they lose any grandfathering.
Okay. All right. Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Any public comment on this item at this time? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for further discussion or a motion. Commissioner Tingle.
I move to approve LU-2019-0071 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Preston?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Good luck, sir. Aye, aye, aye. Aye, 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 aye. Moving on. E3, LU-2019-0072, for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding request for a special use permit to construct a detached garage resulting in accessory structure exceeds 75% of the size of the primary structure and 5% of the lot area, and to allow a garage that included a total of 8 parking bays, which exceeds the maximum number of bays allowed without approval of a special use permit on property zone single-family 2-acre SF2A located at 1651 North Winnie Lane, APN 007-572-34. Heather?
Thank you. Heather Ferris for the record again. The applicant is proposing a 6,438 square foot accessory structure that will serve as a garage for storing and protecting vehicles owned by the resident of the property. The subject property already contains a single-family residence, approximately 3,825 square feet, as well as a guest building, approximately 850 square feet in size. The site is surrounded by residential properties of similar size. Many properties in the area have one or more accessory structures on the property. It's common on parcels in rural locations to have accessory structures, often larger accessory structures. A garage is a permitted accessory use in the single-family 2-acre zoning district. However, per Carson City Municipal Code 18.05.055, a detached accessory building exceeding 75% of the size of the primary structure requires approval of a special use permit. When considering the existing detached accessory structures and the proposed accessory structure, the total cumulative square footage would be 7,278 square feet, or approximately 190% of the size of the primary residential structure. 18.05.055 also requires a special use permit if the cumulative square footage of the accessory structures will exceed 5% of the parcel size. The parcel is 2.14 acres. As I noted, the cumulative square footage is 7,287 square feet, or 7.8% of the parcel size. In addition to these percentage requirements, the code requires parking bays be limited to 5 parking bays for detached accessory structures unless a special use permit is approved. The garage as proposed will have a total of 8 parking bays, 6 of which would face Winnie Lane, and 2 would be facing the existing residence. As you know, there are 7 findings of fact that the Planning Commission must make in the affirmative in order to approve special use permit. Staff has made all 7 findings in the affirmative and is recommending approval, subject to 10 conditions outlined in the staff report. We have received 2 email correspondence, which are included in your packet and supplemental material. One was in support of the project, the other is objecting to it. The objection is that the large garage is not in keeping with the residential nature of the neighborhood. I would note that this is not a commercial garage, but is proposed for the personal use by the residents of the property. Staff has also incorporated conditions of approval requiring review and approval of exterior colors to ensure that it blends with the surrounding neighborhood as well as the existing home on site. And exterior lighting must be reviewed for compliance with development standards. Additionally, the property directly south has also received approval for, I believe it's an 8-bay garage, rather large. And there are several other properties in that vicinity that have rather large accessory structures. The applicant, Melissa McGuire, is here and may wish to address the Planning Commission, and I'm available for questions.
Questions for staff? Seeing none, would the applicant come forward, please? Would you state your name for the record, please?
Melissa McGuire for the record.
First of all, Ms. McGuire, are you comfortable with all the conditions of approval? Are you accepting all those?
Yes, we are.
Anything you would like to add to Heather's presentation, or?
No, she did a great job.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
Is the cross dog still there?
The cross dog is still there. He's a bit old.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? Great, thank you. Seeing none,
Thank you.
we'll open this for public comment. Anyone wish to comment at this time? Yes, sir, if you come forward, please.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
since this is our first public comment tonight, I will state that we are using a timer tonight
Oh, okay.
through the entirety of the meeting for public comments, not necessarily applicants and the board. So you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Go ahead, sir.
Do I hold that?
No, just hold it, just push it.
There you go. When it's green at the base, you're on.
Yeah, I'm Lance Carpenter. I'm in charge of the property at 1950 Ash Canyon Road. Family that's lived out there for 60 years. Okay, Bill Bliss is the one that had that place before, Bob Weiss did. There was a 6 and 8 car garage that was already there on that barn. Okay, I don't have a problem with it if he's gonna put that garage right back where it was. But if he's not gonna, it's such a big monstrosity, 6,000 square feet, that's huge.
Thank you, sir.
I think you're just gonna have a lot of problems with people bitching and complaining. If he puts it back there, it's like the one to the south that Jimmy Bowden put in. He did it very classfully, and you don't even know it's there. Nobody has a complaint on that, but this one here, if he puts it where the original one was, it's hid by that barn, and you can't see it from the road when he's laying either. But if he's gonna put it out on the other side, I'm saying no.
Thank you.
Sir, can you sign in on that piece of paper? That's right on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Staff, a question on that? Any other public comment? I'm sorry, first at this time on that item. Seeing none, as long as they're in the parameters of property lines, et cetera, we have no say over where it's being placed, correct?
So they are proposing to place it within, within the setbacks, so they're fine with that. If there's something visually that is concerning, then that might be a cause for you to be, checking the findings to make sure that conditions of approval and findings all mesh up.
I just wanted to make the point, as long as it's within the setbacks. I mean, that's the only requirements that basically are put on an item like that.
And the other thing that I will point out is Bob Weiss, when he owned all three parcels, it was, I believe, 2 parcels. He's since divided it into 3. So putting it back by the barn wouldn't necessarily be feasible because the parcel lines have changed.
Thank you for that input. Any other questions for staff? All right, I'll bring it back for discussion or a motion. Commissioner Doers.
I move to approve LU-2019-0072 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Borders seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries 6-0. Moving on. LU -2019-070 for possible action, discussing possible action regarding a request for a special use permit to expand an automotive service station use and to use an alternative approach to meeting downtown mixed-use development standards, property zone downtown mixed use, DTMU, located at 1112 North Carson Street, APN 001-178-06.
Okay, first I'd like to make a disclosure. It's come to my attention that members of the Historic Society, a group that I belong to, in my private capacity, may be speaking during public comment, either in their individual capacities or in their capacity on behalf of their organization. I have not been involved in any discussions regarding the proposed public comments, and my staff report was prepared before I received notice that members may be speaking. My independent judgment as the planning manager has not been affected by my membership, and I am making this disclosure in the interest of full transparency and not because I have a conflict of interest. With that,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay. So as the chair said, the request is for a special use permit to expand the automobile service station, which technically the use is called the automobile service station, no repair, convenience market is accessory. The subject property houses the former Adele's Restaurant with a parking lot in the rear. The applicant is seeking to use the property to the north so as to improve the on-site circulation. The scope of the improvements would be a dumpster, parking spaces, landscaping, a bench, and an art monument. No additional fuel pumps are proposed. There's been some mistakes on that. We did earlier, they were proposing fuel pumps. The application before you does not include any fuel pumps. This project relies on the removal of the existing building, which housed Adele's. The subject building was built between 1875 and 1880, but has some additions. The subject property is not in the historic district. So there's been some confusion about that, but it is not in the historic district. So there is no review by the Historic Resource Commission required. The subject property is in the downtown mixed-use zoning district. CCMC 1807030 provides guidance for the demolition or removal of structures over 50 years old in the downtown mixed-use zoning districts. The Community Development Director can authorize the demolition of a structure if one of 4 criteria are met, but the demolition may not occur until the Community Development Director approves the plans for the replacement building or site improvements. In October 2019, the Director authorized the demolition based on finding the restoration is not economically feasible and there has not been a documented history of neglect or lack of repairs which has resulted in this condition. The Planning Commission is not being asked to make a decision whether or not this building can be demolished. The Planning Commission is reviewing this because an automobile service station is a conditional use and may only be expanded upon approval of a special use permit. Additionally, per 1807020, the Planning Commission may approve a special use permit for an alternative approach to the design standards in the downtown mixed use. So I want to repeat those three things one more time. The request to demolish this building is not before the Planning Commission. That decision was made in October 2019. What the Planning Commission is looking at the expansion of the automobile service station because it's a conditional use when we look at our table of permitted uses. It may only be expanded subject to a special use permit. Also, because the downtown mixed use has so many design standards, you're reviewing a special use permit regarding the design standards for an alternative approach. For the most part, the design standards are crafted as if there will be a building, and you'll see in the staff report, I went through all the design standards for the downtown mixed use. Okay, so I've repeated that. As you know, the special use permit may only be approved upon making the 7 required findings in the affirmative, plus 3 supplemental findings because it is in the downtown mixed use. I want to talk about just a couple of the findings. Finding 1 talks about consistency with the objectives of the master plan. The land use designation, as we've already discussed, is downtown mixed use. The purpose of this designation is to recognize downtown as the most intense activity center in the heart of the community. The designation is intended to allow for and encourage a broader mix of uses than exists today in downtown, while respecting its historic context and creating an inviting, pedestrian-friendly environment. I only focus on the findings that are hard. This one's hard, because you think to yourself, well, wait, we want this pedestrian-oriented situation downtown, yet this is an automobile service station, so how do we reconcile those two things? The service station's there already. What this will do is this will allow for better on-site circulation with this service station. This expansion is going to allow for a better function of an existing use. The site is 9,583 square feet. I'd say half that site is already a parking lot in the rear, and the front is the building. Staff finds that if this site is properly designed, the expansion can be an asset to the downtown. And you'll see in the staff report, a bulk of the staff report is focused on the design of the site. On finding number 2, it talks about preserving the character and integrity of adjacent development in neighborhoods. Staff's primary concern when looking at this, and actually Commissioner Tingle wanted to know how I went about looking at a special use permit and actually did a ride along with me on this one. And I said, my concerns are Curry Street and Carson Street. They're both pedestrian scale developments, and we're very concerned about how this will interact with each of those streets. So staff has recommended that to soften the visual impact of the trash dumpster, that the stone veneer that's utilized on the building wall be utilized on that enclosure. Staff also recommends that the seat wall that's found throughout downtown and currently in front of Jackson's be extended along the entire frontage of Carson Street on the subject property and then extend 10 feet onto John Street. I'll just mention the property that's just to the south of this property where the Jackson's is was recently redeveloped. When they did that, they used the seat walls that are found throughout downtown and the landscaping palette that's found throughout downtown. I do want to mention Vern Cron, who recently retired, who was really instrumental in helping us work with Jackson's to continue that streetscape from the downtown into where the convenience store is. My recommendation is that we continue to utilize that same streetscape with the wall and the landscape palette. The 10-foot planter should be planted on the inside of the wall, utilizing the same plant palette found throughout the entire downtown. Also, on the driveway on Curry Street, staff would recommend a reduction to 34 feet in width, and that 6-foot wide landscape strip be placed where the driveway is not located. As proposed, is a very wide driveway, which is counter to the idea of it being a pedestrian-oriented area. We do have a maximum driveway width for light commercial uses, and that maximum driveway width is 34 feet. I think they were recommending something in the area of 40-something feet. On finding number 5, it talks about whether or not the proposal is meeting all of the development standards. So as we've talked about, the development standards 6.6 provide detailed standards for our downtown mixed use. I want to talk about the lighting. The applicant is proposing 3 lights along John Street. Staff finds the proposed lighting is not compatible with the established character of downtown in the surrounding neighborhoods and does not constitute the decorative lighting that's required and contemplated in the development standards. Staff has included a condition of approval advising that the proposed lighting is not approved and an alternative light fixture consistent with the development standard should be proposed for review and approval by the Community Development Director. 6.64 talks about outdoor gathering spaces and community amenities. The applicant is proposing a bench and an art monument at the corner of Carson Street and John Street. The art monument is essentially a base that art can be placed on. Staff is recommending that the applicant propose art to the city's Cultural Commission for its review and approval. If the Cultural Commission does not find this to be a desirable place for art, the monument shall not be installed and the area shall be landscaped. Any art shall be privately owned and maintained, but the public will have visual access to it. The property is the northern boundary of our downtown, so this piece of art could be a gateway monument of sorts. 6.67 talks about streetscapes, and we kind of talked about this a little bit. The proposed conditions is that the development incorporate the wall that's consistent with the walls that we see throughout the downtown area, that the landscape palette be consistent with the landscaping throughout the downtown area, that the bench furniture be consistent with the other bench furniture in the downtown area. So we are looking for consistency in streetscape. Because this is in the downtown mixed-use zoning district, we have 3 supplemental findings, which you don't typically have. We usually say, oh, you have 7 findings of fact. Well, this time you get 10. So the extra 3 findings are very similar, actually, to the 7 findings. Supplemental finding 1 talks about the use being consistent and compatible with the character and intent for the downtown character area in which it's proposed. And I think we talked a lot about that and going through each of those development standards for the downtown mixed use. You really have to look at each of those standards and how this site will be designed to meet those standards. Supplemental finding 2 talks about incorporating the site as part of a broader mix of uses to be supportive to support an active, people-oriented environment within the downtown character area. And supplemental finding 3 talks about integrating the site into a more urban development pattern in a manner that is consistent with the master plan policies for downtown. As conditioned, in the plan before you does not necessarily incorporate the conditions staff's recommended. I think to a large extent, the compatibility of the site's really going to be determined when you walk in front of it. And you see that wall, that's the same wall throughout downtown. When you have it anchored at the corner with the piece of art in the bench, that's similar to downtown. When you see that landscape palette carried forward throughout Carson Street on this site, and then on Curry Street, we see that the driveway shrinks from what's proposed with the landscaping incorporated. I really believe that with these design details, this site can turn into an amenity for the downtown area. Frank Lepori is the applicant. He is present, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hope. I think some of the confusion, because there was an article in the paper that basically mentioned larger pumps and taller stuff for SUVs coming in, et cetera, is where the confusion came from. And I asked a question of staff, if there are no pumps at this time, what if they wanted to add pumps? And if they wanted to add pumps, obviously that would have to come back to the Planning Commission. And knowing how that works, if they were going to put pumps in, I think they would do it before they re-asphalt and put all the driveway in and everything, because that would all have to be dug up if they wanted to do that. Anyway, so that took care of that. Any other questions for staff? Would the applicant like to come forward? like to come forward, please? Go ahead, Tom. Welcome. You'd state your name for the record, please.
I'm Dominic Gonzalez. I work for Lepre Construction and filled out and did the application.
Awesome. First of all, the 17 conditions of approval are acceptable to you folks?
Yes, sir.
Is there anything you'd like to add to her presentation or add for us?
No, I've worked well with Hope. She kicked my butt while we were going through it, and she did great. So,
Any questions for the applicant, Commissioner Borders?
What are your plans for the Victorian house? Are you going to demolish it or move it?
My name is Frank Lepre, and at this point right now, we're demolishing it, but we'd be more than happy to work with the city and see if somebody wants to move it like they did in Reno when they moved Bartley Ranch, maybe move the structure somewhere else. More than happy to do that with you. We'd like to, if
Appreciate
possible,
that.
if we want to do something like that, maybe we can get it done before March of 2020. It'd be great for us.
I know I appreciate that because I know there was concerns from all of us that have lived here for quite a while. I know that building's history, it originally came out of Virginia City. And like the Roberts House, I know across the way came from Washoe Valley. But I know the cost of repair and all that, looking at it, was substantial. But again, I don't know what it would be if someone wanted to take it and move it. It would be really neat if somebody could do that.
I think we're all that way. We're all born, I'm myself born and raised here. My family's been here for the turn of the century, 1900s. So we all like to keep that building somewhere if we could.
And as I said, I think the cost would be much less if you were just trying to make it a building again rather than trying to get it all furnished and back the way it was. But again, I don't know what the cost to move or whatever might be.
For the benefit of the record, Frank, are you volunteering that the house would be available at no fee to anyone who would like to move it, provided it is moved off the site by March 2020?
Yeah, we just have to work out the details, Hope, of liability and different things like that. So there's no liability to the owner of the property or myself. And besides that, I don't think there's any cost to it.
That would be awesome. Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none? Thank you. At this point, we'll take public comment on this item. So if you'd like to come forward, sir. And state your name for the record, and we're practicing our little timer thing here, so we'll give you up to 3 minutes if you need.
All right. Well, good afternoon, commissioners, the public. My name is Sam Flakus, and I'm a volunteer at the Nevada State Railroad Museum, and I also helped set up the Carson Street Green Dining District, which was inaugurated this year with great success. Our first order of business was to recruit restaurants to participate in the pilot program for reducing the amount of waste, food waste, going into the landfills to encourage reusable containers. So on February 17th, 2019 of this year, it was Charlie and Karen Abow's turn to sign up Adele's for the program. They invited me to the restaurant and we talked for an hour or so about the program and how cities can be adapted to the needs of the environment. We got them signed up and we mutually agreed that it was going to be a great partnership. Just weeks later, however, their laundry room caught fire and they were out of business until repairs could be made. When it became apparent that the insurance policy would not pay what it would cost to get fired up again, that temporary closure became permanent. And now, in spite of the work the Abouds have led in creating a vibrant downtown Carson Street, supported by the downtown mixed-use zoning district that promotes the use of historic buildings for a modern Carson City, their 1870s house that was adapted into a restaurant is at risk of being turned into a parking lot for a company that sells petroleum products. This structure is supposed to be protected by the Historic Resources Commission, which I realize is not in their zone. There are many buildings within the DTMU that are indeed historic. I'm asking that the commission deny the application on the part of the gas station for a special use permit on the grounds that there may be fire damage to another wing of the building that was added later, but that the house itself, built by 1875 that we can prove, and occupied by V&T General Manager Frank Murphy, who worked for the V&T for 51 years, has some smoke damage, but little else. I walked by there today and peeked in the windows, and I don't see anything wrong with it. Being as it has been destroyed, it has not been destroyed beyond repair, I am asking the commission to table the decision until brought to either the Historic Resources Commission, not because we have to, but because it would just be the right thing to do. And time has been allotted for a preservation group to either move the building to another location or develop the property by a nonprofit to save the building. This can be done in a way that can be beneficial to the gas station. DTMU code requires that they procure an art piece on that corner, and what people want to see is that old house. Without the additions, it takes up a small footprint of 27 feet by 37 feet by my measurement. So if the additions are removed, the station will have the circulation that they need. Now, being as I also volunteer for the Railroad Museum, I can't speak on their behalf because I'm not the state, I'm the volunteer organization. But I got a hold of Mark Amadei's office because he's, another Carsonite who cares about this stuff, and his staff got a hold of me yesterday. It turns out that the museum is planning on acquiring the federal lands which are currently occupied by the Forest Service. They're trying to move that land to the museum. And myself and another colleague were thinking that that would be a good place to move the house. So it's a good thing that there are other people here who are interested in moving the house. But the problem is nothing can move until, for another 12 months. Can't do anything. So what I'm asking this commission to do is to buy us some time to find a new home for it, or to, come up with an alternative proposition to save the house, because we don't have much left. I mean, if we keep, saying, it's just one more house, it's just one more house, we're not going to have anything left. That's all we have.
Thank you, sir. We'll take any other comment, and then we'll address any comments that were made.
Thank you. Denny French, Carson City, Nevada, Chair and Council. Denny French. I'm nervous. The deal is, that's awesome. That is the first time I heard of that as an option. I really hope that you will take into consideration that could happen. That would be awesome. So thank you. That's just all I wanted to say. That was so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name's Gene Munnings, and I came here in October of '93. And every Saturday for the first 4 or 5 months, there was a tour of the historic buildings in Carson City, and that was one of them that went in there. It's the first time I ever knew about Adele's. And that was a mansard-style building, and there's only 2 existing in the area. There's one just a few blocks back. And being that it's more than 100 years old, we can't replace anything like that. And I was in there when they were doing the auction, and it's not any smoke damage really that much in the main building. It's all back in the laundry room areas where the main part is. It's not that hard to bring it back up. And I can't see tearing something down. You can't replace it. And I just thought it be great, but it'd be given to all the nonprofits and the other little community groups that meet, have to scatter all over this city. They could have that to meet in, and they would have the labor to be able to bring it up to code and make it a viable place, since it's called the Community Meeting House. I just can't see wasting something like that. You can't replace it. And it's, everybody knows it's been here just to pay it a parking lot. Basically, that's all it is. I mean, that's not what you call the history of Carson City. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, Oh, one more, I'm sorry.
Loretta Williams, and I would like to say that from the Roberts house, we had smoke damage there. And I haven't been into Adele's, but I'm thinking that it can't be much worse than what was the Roberts house. And we were able to restore that, get it open again. Took a year, but it's open again. And another thing that bothers me a lot is that there was an interested person that lives in Idaho. He loved coming to Adele's and have dinner. He would come through town quite often. And he contacted a real estate gal here and said, keep me informed what's going on there. And because he was interested in buying it, he offered to buy it from Charlie. And of course, he did not, Charlie wanted to make sure that the name Adele's was not to be used again. And so that was one of the things that didn't make the sale go. And so I talked to him, talked to this man this morning, and he wants to know what's going on now. And the realtor said that she would keep him informed of what was going on, and she didn't do that. So he didn't have the chance to offer money again or make a deal with this. So that was a not good thing, because he still is interested in restoring the house. So, okay.
Thank you. Next. Gotta wait till we get here. Don't mess with this guy. She'll hit me.
For the record, Rex Jennings. I'm not saying that it should be the city's responsibility to save everything, but I think they should help. Because looking back at the old V&T maintenance shop getting away, the old sandstone building, schoolhouse, when we moved here, day after Christmas, 1964, that was still standing at the corner of King and Division Street, and it's gone. We need to keep our history and look at that. I would hate to see this building go. I won't say I'm a fan of Adele's food, but, I love the building. So, and last comment is why do I only have 3 minutes?
Any other public comment on this? Bringing it back, as Hope stated at the beginning of this item, we're not here to address the building, unfortunately. I don't think there's a member up here that isn't concerned about that building as well. I was surprised that it isn't in a historic district, that it wasn't, but who knows? I guess at the time, the owners didn't want it there and they weren't forced into it and it was overlooked, whatever. But the people that are looking, that we are talking about today, the gas station folks are willing to work with some people to possibly move it. If they want to sell it, I have no clue. But again, that's not in our parameter today. That was done in October, but the final say on that would be through if this would go on to the supervisors possibly, if it were, no, can't be appealed, I wouldn't think. It could be appealed, I guess, and then go to the Board of Supervisors. But again, what we're here tonight for is just to address the idea of it coming down and then putting in the upgrades. Okay. We'll bring it back for further discussion.
Mr. Chair, if I could just mention, everything you said is 100% correct. Having said that, the applicant did volunteer a condition of approval. And that you could not make him do that, but because he volunteered it, you may include in he volunteered it on the record. So that condition, should you choose to add it, would be that the house is available at no fee to anyone who would like to move it. It must be moved by March 2020, recognizing that the property owner will handle any logistics with a potential acquirer, if that's a word, and the
And no-
city would not be involved in those discussions.
And no insurance
That would be a purely
to them.
private
That would be a
transaction.
private transaction between him and whoever was taking the property. Which, I have no problem if he's willing to accept that as a condition, at least leave that door open.
I think that's fine. I think we should be careful though, because Mr. Lepre might mean that he is willing to transport the building at no cost, but he doesn't, I don't think, own the building.
He's representing his client, and the way this is worded, it would be made available to anyone who would like to move it, so that person would need to move it and bear that
understood.
responsibility and that cost.
So made available.
There would be no expectation that the property owner would bear the cost of moving the building.
Understood.
What's it? What's the flavor? Do we think we should? I believe we should probably add that since he's offered that. It's a nice offer.
Okay, I'd like to make a couple of little statements, and I know that we're really not supposed to get involved in this house thing, but I am going to get involved in it a little bit in the fact that that parking lot that was behind Adele's was owned by my family. When Paul and Adele came, they actually did a lot of sweat equity into that place. And my dad offered to sell them the parking lot behind it to sustain the restaurant. And they became friends, and we're talking in the late 70s. During that time, my dad made every addition onto that house and knows all the historical and so forth on it. So yeah, I've got a lot of heart into it, and I appreciate more than you can imagine the offer to be able to move that house. Because over the years, we did a lot of work on the Nugget. And behind the Nugget, there was a lot of historical type of houses. And on those historical houses that we did, we actually moved those throughout the town. And they've been relocated to other areas. It can be done. There are good people that can do it. And for you to offer it at no cost, the only thing that I have a question of, and it's just because I'm a Carson City gal, March has a lot of snow. And what I'm wondering is if you could possibly give them 4 months rather than 3. I'm going to ask. I mean, the worst you can say to me is no. But the thing is that because I do have experience in moving homes, I think we've moved in fact, we even moved an apartment house from Harbin Street, cut it in half and made it part of the Plaza Motel back years ago. So I do know that the logistics of it are a little bit more difficult, first of all, to find the land, and then to be able to get your movers to move it, and dealing with things like overhead wires and so forth. So this is, right now, our streets have been somewhat constrained because of the narrowing of them and snow removal. That's the only thing. I'm just saying logistically, 3 months is awesome, 4 months would be better. So I don't know, if you could consider that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Along that same line, another thing, though, the house doesn't have to be moved to a new location permanent. It could just be moved off that property somewhere until whoever could get it together to then put it down by the Railroad Museum, wherever they want to put it. I'm sure they could maybe find somebody with a vacant lot or whatever that could be moved to, temporarily left on whatever it's moving on. Isn't that a possibility?
The old roundhouse space.
Yeah, I was thinking of the roundhouse space, actually, go buy Jack in the Box or something. But I mean, that he's magnanimous enough to make the offer even to March, and I don't want to really tie his hands from getting done what he wants to get done, so. But again, that's just, we can add that condition of the fact that he's given us the option of, willing to work with someone to move.
Mr. Chair, the applicant you've had a lot of conversation. I think the applicant wants to comment on your conversation.
Please, sir.
One of the things, hope if we can just add, will be no liability to the owner of the house in the condition. And then secondly, if there's a snowstorm in March, we work with you for a couple of weeks if we had to. So if we can leave it to the 90 days or March 1st would be great. Then if you have a hot prospect and they need a week or so, I don't think anybody's going to get, yeah, we'll make it work.
We appreciate that, sir.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Borders.
I appreciate the offer, and I also don't think we ought to get into the negotiation of if there's a snowstorm or not. But I think if we can get from the applicant a 90-day window to allow somebody to come up with whatever they need to make arrangements to move that building at no liability, I think that's a win for everybody.
No liability and no connection to the city.
Yeah.
It's just strictly going to be between the two parties, and I think that's excellent. So do we want to put that in a condition or just leave it between them? I
No,
think we should put it in a condition.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we approve LU 2019-70 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval in the staff report, including condition number 18 that Hope enumerated for us.
And for the benefit of the record, the house will be available at no fee to anyone who would like to move it. It must be moved by, we'll say, within 90 days of today. Does that work?
I think you want to just put March 1st,
Okay.
2020, give
It
you a
must
couple
be-
extra days.
Okay. It must be moved by March 1st, 2020. The owner will accept no liability. This will be an agreement between two parties, and the city will not be involved in any negotiations regarding moving the house.
Will you, sir?
That's not 90 days.
Well, so he didn't say 90 days, he said March. You'd like to have it
I
moved?
think you want to use March 1st, gives you an extra couple weeks. I know that you won't get much done over the holidays, though. And we're fine with that, Hope.
Well, April 1st is 90 days.
Yeah, see, Jan, you're going to be Jan, yeah. It's like 70 or whatever, 75. I'm sure if it looks feasible, there can be negotiations between the parties if they need a few more days. It's nothing that we need to do. I think we go with what the applicant is offering, which is March 1st.
Does the current motion stand?
That's my motion with one question as to whether our mouthpiece will agree to all that.
Legally?
Our legal.
Are we okay here?
Yes, since the applicant volunteered it, we're good.
Okay, then my motion stands.
I second. Commissioner Doors seconds.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you all. Moving on. E5, ZA 2019-004, for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a recommendation of the Board of Supervisors for an ordinance amending Title 18, Chapter 18.6 Development Standards, Division 2.3, to allow both parking spaces to count towards the required minimum number of parking spaces when tandem parking is used in a single-family residential development and providing other matters properly related thereto. Heather?
Thank you. Heather Ferris, Associate Planner for the record. The Planning Division received an application to change the parking standards to allow for tandem parking to be counted towards the minimum number of parking spaces required for single-family residential developments. Currently, city code prohibits tandem parking being counted towards the minimum parking requirements in a single-family residential development unless it was approved as part of a planned unit development. Additionally, Division 6 of the development standards allows for tandem parking in the downtown mixed-use zoning district for residential developments if at least one space is within an enclosed garage or parking structure. This request focuses on the parking requirements for single-family residential developments outside of the downtown mixed-use zoning district. The applicant has indicated that tandem parking garages are becoming more popular with builders in the region to help with affordability, provide for flexible spaces for storage when households have fewer cars, and to provide a different aesthetic than the garage door dominance that you have in many neighborhoods. Additionally, tandem parking can provide for more flexibility in design and how space is allocated inside and rear yards. Staff has also researched other jurisdictions in our region to see how they deal with tandem parking. For the most part, every jurisdiction allows for tandem parking in certain types of developments. To summarize the table that's on the screen, the City of Reno and City of Sparks make allowances in their code for tandem parking in residential developments. Washoe County will allow tandem parking if the property is is located in the hillside area and the applicant has provided sufficient evidence that tandem parking will reduce grading. Churchill County has regulations that mirror our own, only allowing tandem spaces to be counted in mobile home parks, RV parks, and planned unit developments. The City of Fernley and Douglas County only allow spaces to be counted when located in mobile home parks, and Lyon County does not permit tandem spaces to be counted. Carson City currently requires a parking ratio of 2 spaces per single-family dwelling unit. Additionally, guest parking is required at a ratio of 1 space for every 2 units if on-street parking is prohibited. Tandem parking cannot be used to meet this minimum requirement for single-family residential developments, again, unless it's in a planned unit development. Existing planned unit developments have utilized tandem parking and have done so without any specific size requirements for individual parking spaces or driveways. And this can oftentimes result in driveways that are not long enough to accommodate an average size car, not to mention larger SUVs or trucks. 2 single-family residential PUDs that have been utilized, tandem parking are the Millennium Development, located on Molly Drive just north of Highway 50 East, and Jackson Village, which is located at the south end of the city off of Eagle Station. Allowing tandem parking to be counted towards the minimum required spaces can be beneficial in providing for design flexibility for single-family residential developments. Here's just a couple examples of what tandem parking might look like. There is concern, however, that tandem parking could result in increased parking pressures on roadways within developments. In order to address these concerns, staff recommends incorporating parameters for the use of tandem parking in single-family residential development. We would recommend that internal and abutting public streets provide parking on both sides of the streets, or in a case where on-street parking is prohibited, we would recommend an increased ratio of 1 space for each unit as opposed to 1 space for every 2 units as the code currently requires. The tandem spaces are provided on individual lots for the exclusive use of those individual lots. And that tandem spaces must have a minimum dimension of 10 feet wide by 20 feet in length, excluding the width of the sidewalk. There are 3 findings of fact that the Planning Commission must make in the affirmative in forwarding a recommendation of approval to the Board of Supervisors. Staff has made all 3 findings in the affirmative and is recommending approval, and I'd be happy to discuss those findings with you. The draft ordinance is also included in your packet, and John Krumpatek is the applicant, and he's here and may wish to address the Planning Commission, and I'm available for questions.
Thanks, Heather. A couple things. I just have a little concern about opening this up citywide. Is there any way it could be done on an as-needed? Since we're looking at Title 18 right now, I think this will come up, won't it, at some point, or possibly in that we could address it there, or?
Well, it would certainly come up, Lee Plummel, Community Development Director. It would certainly come up during our Title 18 review. I'm not sure we're going to get to parking in the next, probably not within the next year will something be adopted. So if this relates to projects coming up, this might be something to address. Also, in speaking with our district attorney's office regarding the process, knowing that we are updating all of Title 18, we've been mutually clear that there may be issues that come up where we may bring necessary code amendments forward to fix smaller parts without addressing the whole section. And because this is an applicant's, I think this is something worth considering now and addressing because we have an applicant bringing it forward.
But could we do this on an individual basis until that point, rather than doing it citywide right now?
So you could potentially add a requirement for an SUP for tandem parking. Then they're not required to do a PUD when they don't necessarily desire to do a PUD, but they would have the option of utilizing tandem parking through an SUP.
Could that be left to where they would just work with staff on that issue, or would it still have to come to us? Is there any way we could have it?
We could require an administrative permit. That way, it's still a public hearing, but it's through administrative hearing as opposed to planning commission.
I'm just trying to get some ideas out there with the idea that then we address this in the next year or so and decide whether we want to go citywide or whatever and change it in the Title 18, but we don't want to hold anyone up from proceeding with a project that they want to go forward with. And maybe there's a way to do it without them having to pay a fee for an SUP at this point. I don't know, whatever staff is comfortable with, or.
There would still be a fee, just to clarify, if there's an administrative hearing. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. It is reduced in comparison to an SUP.
Commissioner Doors?
Just for the record, I think it's a good idea. I think we should leave it, though, that it's, instead of being administrative, that we do see it. I think we should change it to be a special use permit as opposed to a PUD, but still leave it to come in front of the commission personally, just because I think, we all kind of represent a variety of the community, and that's kind of a dangerous, I think we should still be able to see those individually.
Until it's addressed in Title 18 and one way or
Yes,
the other.
exactly.
But I don't think we need to necessarily go forward with this amendment at this time.
Yeah, I agree.
Comments from
We're going to hear from the applicant.
Mr. Board? I just didn't know if we had other comments for staff or questions for
Not
staff.
for staff, I have comments.
Okay. Would the applicant come forward, please? Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Sadler, Commissioners. John Krumpottek. I did make the application. Been working on a property with Heather and Hope for about 7 months now, I believe. It has many challenges, and it sounds like you guys have, pretty much went down a pretty definitive path, but I don't have a PowerPoint. I thought I would just be here for Q&A because we were very much in agreement with the staff recommendation. But there are a few points I would like to make. It's very, very common anywhere in the country, and I know it's dangerous because people say we don't care what's going on in Sacramento. This is Carson City or Reno. But it's really about flexibility and design. It gives you a very nice, could I put an exhibit on the, could you put one up on the screen just to show this elevation? Oh, you guys don't have, okay. This is the first time I've been here where we sit here like this. Used to be over there and I had a little more. Actually, you've got one, that's right. But if you take a look at that, one of the things that's achieved in neighborhood design is the cutesy pie part of less garage and more house and porch. So there's kind of a cottage feel in delivering this product. The single biggest reason is about affordability, attaining the dream. And we think we've got a location with a small product, with a single car garage that's single width, 2 deep, and a driveway. So as a practical matter, you have 3 spaces, but it's counted as 1. And there is some inconvenience, but the buyer says, I'm getting a house in exchange for the inconvenience potentially if you have more than 1 garage and you got some jockeying in and out in the morning. That's what happens. I do it every day now with my wife, but we're okay with it. So I would, and you did bring up a good point about, about the concern about its pervasive effect to the neighborhood. But I think staff kind of corralled that in their 3 stipulations, which were mandate of on-street parking both sides, so it deals with guests, or in the absence of that, one guest space per unit. Let's see, the other thing they said was exclusive for that house, right? Obviously, the tandem has to be for the owner of the home, and then the dimensions, of course. And dimensions kind of take care of themselves. We have a 12-foot wide single-car garage that we're trying to accomplish. Staff has showed 10, which is certainly adequate. But I just hope you, I think in talking to a national home builder, the biggest in the United States, who's a client of mine, said they're doing this everywhere. And there is no problem with parking. It sort of regulates itself because you're buying a smaller house. You are a person who's buying into a condition that doesn't need to store 3 and 4 vehicles. So it's typically single car owner households or 2 car owner households, and it takes care of itself without, again, spreading to the street. And I just hope you consider about the affordability. I really think it makes a huge difference, and it makes a huge difference because of the flexibility we have in design. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. So appreciate the time, and I would entertain any questions as well. Thank you.
I don't think, sir, that we're not anti-tandem parking. I was just wondering, when we're reviewing Title 18, at this point, do we want to make a zoning amendment at this point going in that will probably be made down the road, or just make it where it would be handled individually or through whatever, through the plan of the development?
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, in order to even allow tandem parking via an SUP, we will need to change the code. So it will be an amendment to the code either way. Yeah.
So this will have to pass in order to allow it even through an SUP method?
Yes.
I think it's probably helpful if the commission has discussion after you have the public hearing, and then the staff can help you kind of navigate the landscape.
Any other questions for the applicant, Commissioner Dors?
Not a question, just a statement. I think that we're all, like the chair just said, no one's anti-tandem. I think there's just concerns, especially with, excessive street parking in case of not being able to get into the second spot or whatever. And I think that to kind of then piggyback onto what Ms. Sullivan just said, I think that us kind of getting together, hashing it out, and then them hashing it out, and I think ultimately you get what you want. Unfortunately, it's just not something that if I'm reading the room, that we're going to be pushing forward today.
We actually would have to pass this in order to even do an SUP parking.
Maybe I misunderstood. Can you?
Actually, the chair and I spoke yesterday, and that's where the concept of the SUP came up. What came up was there was worry. Okay. Changing the code, what are the ramifications? What are we not thinking about? What is this going to lead to? Lots of what ifs. So the idea of a blanket, okay, we can do tandem parking, it's allowed now for any single-family residential. It's kind of, well, wait, are we missing something? Is there a downside that we're not catching? So that was sort of the conversation, if I'm characterizing it properly. And so, although I think Heather did a really good job in putting some safeguards in there, and I actually feel like those safeguards should be in those other places where we do allow tandem parking, where we do have, she put in minimum lot size, you have to have on-street parking, so on and so forth. Anyhow, so in discussing it with the chair, we thought, well, okay, let's look at building height. With building height, well, let me back up. A lot of times what people will say is, oh, well, go get a variance. The findings for variance are really hard. You rarely see variances, because usually if somebody comes forward and says, I want a variance, by the time they hear what staff's going to say, they don't bother. And so they don't pursue it. So the findings, and I'm just marvel sometimes at the fact that we can have a building height increase with a special use permit. And there are other things, the sign can be a little bit bigger with a special use permit. So what are we doing with a special use permit? With a special use permit, we're saying this is going to work in this situation. It's not going to adversely affect, neighboring. It's not going to overcome, public services, and so our 7 findings, right? That is a much lower bar than the bar for a variance. With a variance, you need the variance has to be a derivative of the land. The land has to cause the need for a variance. That's a very difficult thing to achieve. So in talking with the chair, we're having this conversation. We're saying, well, yeah, John could have applied for the variance with his project. Staff wasn't prepared to support it. We absolutely would not support it. And we told him that, so he didn't pursue it. And so, but how do we allow tandem parking knowing it might work sometimes? There's a history throughout the entire country where it worked. Heather and I are talking, she's from one coast, I'm from the other coast, and we both grew up in houses with tandem parking. So it's not that unusual. So it can't be that hard. So maybe the answer is, well, let's try it out with the SUP. And that way, when you're looking at the tentative map, you're looking at the SUP just like you consider the SUP on building height, you consider the SUP on the size of the sign, and so on and so forth, and you look at those findings when you consider it. And I would also suggest that those supplemental standards that Heather drafted be included, because I think those are really important. So hopefully that creates some context.
Well, and it clarifies too kind of where my thought pattern was. So someone comes in 6 months down here and wants to add a garage next to their house and they want to put a tandem garage on. I mean, how do you handle that? So that's why I thought through an SUP or whatever.
Commissioner Doris, I'm still confused. I understand everything you said, but are we able to, Are we able to kind of continue this? And I thought I understood you to say that we should talk more about this after this meeting and then readdress this at a future meeting.
Okay, there are a couple things. I think what the chair was sort of suggesting is, could we handle this as part of the overall Title 18 update? You have an applicant who paid a fee to have you consider this amendment. He is requesting that you amend the code. And so you have an obligation. Now, you don't have an obligation to say yes, but you have to make a recommendation to the board. And so this one's kind of, it's not that frequent that you get requests from applicants to amend the code, but that's what you have before you today. And you do have findings, which are in the staff report. Staff was able to make those findings, so maybe it would help if Heather walked you through the findings with a little more specificity, and then you can have public comment and see where you land on your findings.
Okay. And we put this through, and that would be citywide, correct? It would be from here forward, anybody that,
So at this point, it's a recommendation to the board, and you can modify the language that's in the draft ordinance. That would be your recommendation to the board, or you can recommend denial.
because what I was trying to accomplish would be to handle it case by case until we go through the Title 18 and make it permanent for everybody, whatever, just to be able to.
So, for example, item A up there would say, single-family residential developments meeting all of the following requirements. 1, obtain approval of a special use permit. 2, 3, and 4 would be as they are now up there in that case. But we might want to take public comment.
Mr. Chairman, could I add something real quick? Just, if it's that big a concern to the commission, we would be, at least we have a path forward, to your point, right? If you want to amend the language and force the SUP, we're going through that process anyway, so at least to protect the case by case, so thank you.
I think that resolves the problem, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do we have public comment on this item? Okay. Sign again, so just state your name for the record.
Thank you, Denny French and Chair and Board. I do have a question about the actual plans that were shown on the deal. My concerns with tandems, since I don't have a lot of experience with them, is that there's sort of a bigger access and exit ability in the two-car traditional. With the tandem, if the designs do not have two accesses or two exits, I would consider that a safety consideration. Are these going to be accessible from the structure, a door out of the kitchen or service area, or is it going to have a door into the back to allow for an exit besides a garage door? Those as far as the specific designs. So if you're saying okay to tandems, will those requirements be added, or will there be considerations to exits and entrances?
Great, we'll address your comments after
Thank
we
you.
hear any others. Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? If not, I think I can address your concerns that any of this would be up to Carson City Code, and you have to have your exits, et cetera, regress, ingress, et cetera. So any tandem or dual garage, it would be the same way. So no more public comment, we'll bring it back.
Commissioner Doors, my only concern, and it's kind of, I might be not, it's very specifically addressed, so maybe I'm not thinking about something, but it's the on-street parking. You know, when when you're dealing with tandem, it's much easier, and I've dealt with tandem too, it's much easier if someone's there just to park on the street. And it is specifically addressed, you know, internal and abutting public streets provide parking on both sides of the street. I think from our perspective and where we're at looking at this, that's a concern, because, you know, then you're just kind of you have a large potential to increase parking on the street as opposed to requiring on property in a tandem garage. So I don't know, I'm kind of stuck on that number one. It seems like we're just encouraging more parking on the streets. You know, the second part is perfect, you know, the increased ratio of one space per unit if on-street parking is not provided, that sounds great. On the other hand, that seems like a lot to just off the bat require on somebody. I'm just having trouble with number one, and it seems like we're encouraging more parking on the street. And at a citywide level, granted, SUP special use permit would be mandated if we add that in. I'm just having trouble.
That's what I was going to say, by adding the SUP, that would be looked at that time, and normally this is going to be used in areas where they're trying to conserve land in area two, so the on-street parking, there won't be as much there anyway. So people would be encouraged to use their driveways and garages, but anyway, that would be addressed through individual each time it came forward. Other comments or?
Me.
Commissioner Borders?
I think we're in the process of trying to rewrite this. We're also in the process of trying to be responsive to a situation. And if we make a change now and a year from now we change it again, that's okay too. But I think we need a path between now and then.
That's the issue.
And that's the SUP. And I'm, Heather, you said you could put it in paragraph 6A. Number one. However, does that mean that 6B, C, D, and E cannot use tandem parking to meet their parking requirements, or are we gonna?
No, that the SUP would only apply to 6A.
Yeah.
But they can.
Single family that they can.
Okay. Okay. All right.
This would become number one there, and then.
Oh, I've got that, but I mean,
Is that what works best for staff as you see at this point?
Yeah, that's fine if that's the pleasure of the commission.
and I also think, excuse me, that it should not be an administrative decision. I think it ought to be our decision.
Right, no, SUP would come to the planning commission. Like the gentleman said, he's already bringing one anyway for his development, so it would just be part of that when he comes. So, we ready for a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Borders.
I move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors approval of ZA 2019-0004, an ordinance amending Title 18, Appendix Development Standards Division 2.3 related to tandem parking requirements, with the addition of an item in paragraph 6A to require a SUP.
That works? We have a motion, and I'll second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 6-0. Thank you.
Does that work for you? Not unless you hurry up.
Here we go. All right, continuing on. E6, 2019-00000164 for possible action, discussion and possible action, recording a request for a special use permit to exceed the height limit of 3 feet as part of a construction of 126 apartment units on 6.13 acre parcel, zone neighborhood business, MB, located on the south side of Little Lane, west of Janice Way, APN 004-015-6. Hope?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last month, the commission approved a 126-unit apartment complex on Little Lane. I have the site up on the board for you. Per the zoning, the height of these buildings is limited to 26 feet. The applicant is now proposing a special use permit for a height, is requesting a special use permit to obtain a height of 29 feet. The applicant is seeking higher ceilings and better building proportions. CCMC 1804-195 allows for additional height beyond the height limit subject to a special use permit. The Planning Commission may approve a special use permit upon making the 7 required findings of fact in the affirmative. I want to speak to finding 2. And again, Commissioner Tingle came on the ride along on this, so she saw how I looked at it. So on finding 2, that talks about detrimental to the use, peaceful enjoyment, economic value of the surrounding properties. I have the site plan up here. You see the property is fronting on Little Lane. To the east is Janice Way. To the south, what you're not seeing, but we could go back to a different plan, elevation, is single-family residential. That's really my concern when I'm considering this height situation. You also see on the site plan that 6 of these 7 buildings are set back over 59 feet from that property line. The 7th building, which is next to the post office, is 30 feet from the property line. So the required setback in this case is 30 feet. So these buildings are double the setback. You also have the side elevation of these buildings as opposed to the front elevation. When we look at our elevations, we see the front elevations include balconies and the like and outdoor spaces, whereas the side elevations do not. So when I'm reviewing this plan and specifically finding 2, I'm concerned about whether or not this increased height is going to adversely impact those single-family residential residents and property owners. In this case, I don't believe it will. I also want to talk about what's happening in this neighborhood. Across the street, let me go back real quick, sorry. One more. There we go. Across the street, you have Arbor Villas under construction. Arbor Villas has a height of 28 feet, 6 inches. The request before you is for 29 feet. Diagonal from the site is the subdivision you recently approved for Bates Homes. They have a height of 37 feet, 6.5 inches. So right now we're talking about something that's 29 feet. With them, it was 37 feet. And in that case, you required a setback of 61 feet from the property line. These buildings are at 59 feet. So at Bates Homes, they had a similar situation that they had single-family detached along that northern property line, the folks who live off Parkland and those streets in there. So because of the distance from the property line and because we're primarily looking at a side elevation and because we are only talking about a short 3 feet, staff has been able to make this finding in the affirmative, and in fact, I have made all 7 findings in the affirmative. Just to clarify, we're not revisiting whether or not these apartments can go there. What we're discussing is how tall these apartments can be. Craig Clark, the applicant, is present, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
You have any questions for staff? Seeing none, would the applicant come forward, please? Welcome. You'd state your name, please.
Craig Clark, company CW Clark, Inc., soon to be a resident of Carson City.
Welcome, sir. First of all, Mr. Clark, the recommended 25 conditions of approval, you're fine with all those?
I am.
All right. Is there anything you would like to add to Hope's presentation or whatever, since we had went through this last month and you're just looking to add 3 more feet to the tops of the building?
We appreciate the consideration, and we look forward to getting started in March.
Sounds good, sir.
You have space for a Victorian house?
You asked the question. No, sir, not me, but I will make a quick suggestion, as long as I'm up here. In San Diego, in Old Town, they created a little park-like deal on the side of a hill behind where all the commercial is and the hotels. And they used that where people could move these types of facilities. So when all the tourists show up in San Diego and go to Old Town for sure, they can walk across the street using the Old Town parking and visit these old Victorian houses.
Neat. Great
And
idea.
it works pretty nicely.
Great idea, sir. Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comment on this item? Seeing no public comment, we can bring it back for discussion or a motion. Commissioner Doors?
I move to recommend approval of an amendment to SUP-19-164 based on the ability to make the required findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Commissioner Preston?
I second.
Commissioner Preston seconds, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 6-0. Good luck, sir. We will take a recess at this time, coming back.
At 5:30.
By 5:30, hopefully, we will be back.